All
Good
these
morning,
big
David.
changes, obviously a very big deal. I guess we'll start things quite simple. Are these changes final? No more chance of changing?
I will say that early this week, we announced 5 enhancements to the HSI. Okay, so I think it reflects because if you can still remember that we start the consultation in December last year, the objective, okay, is that for the consultation is we want to make sure the HSI is evolving and growing along with the Hong Kong stock market. We want to make sure it stays as the most representative and also the important benchmark of the Hong Kong stock market. So I think this Monday we announced the result, which is the result of a month-long stakeholder consultation exercise. And then I will say that we propose 5 enhancements, and this will make the Hang Seng Index more representative and also more balanced and diversified. I think more balanced and diversified is the key directions that we want to bring HSI to. I think that, as I mentioned, we will try to evolve and growing along with the Hong Kong market. So for this time, after this big exercise for the consultation, I will say largely the index will stay as it is for a while.
Okay, so you mentioned the consultation. In fact, when that news dropped, I think it was November and December, it was quite big news. I would imagine, though, the process began even before that. When did it start, the actual inception that we need to look at the index and we need to change it?
I think I don't have a precise date for that because this actually is an ongoing exercise because as I mentioned that we want to ensure the HSI has the good representation. So that's why we follow well the market development, just like I think about 3 years ago, Hong Kong started talking about the WVR and then secondary listing, all the new instruments, or they come to Hong Kong and listing in the new form. We keep a close eye on the index, on the stock market development, and then evolve the index as well. So I think at the point is that I think mid last year, and we start to include the WVR and then the secondary listing companies in the HSI. And then we start to test to see the market feedback as well. And then we think that it should be time to think about the next step for the HSI. And then we start the consultation.
Right, and a couple of clarifications on, I guess, some key concepts, because part of the big change here is a minimum of Hong Kong representation. 20 to 25, I believe, is the number of names there. So what constitutes first good representation of Hong Kong? And Anita, what exactly is a Hong Kong firm? How do you determine what that is?
Okay, so I think we are in Hong Kong and we are talking about the Hong Kong stock market. So we think that in the Hong Kong index, the Hang Seng Index, we need to preserve the elements for the Hong Kong. And that's why we set aside 20 to 25 stocks that will be the Hong Kong stocks. So when you think about the Hong Kong companies, we basically, it's quite technical, but I would say largely the principle is that we look at the business presence. If the company's presence or the history or the principal operations are in Hong Kong, they are the Hong Kong companies. But if they have the major business presence or the main revenue are from China, then they will be perceived as China stocks from our point of view.
Okay, now I can give you a few examples of Hong Kong stocks. A lot of these, say, property companies that are, founded and have been Hong Kong listed for a very long time, now actually have their main businesses on the mainland. Are you thinking about, say, changing the way that you look, say, at those companies?
I would say that all along, okay, defining a company as a China or Hong Kong company is not something new to us. I think we have this in place for more than 10 years. So I think when you talk about some companies that may have business presence in both Hong Kong and China, we will try to see the percentage or the contributions from Hong Kong or China to design. So that you can imagine then they will fall in different queue to consider as constituents.
Okay, and I have to also go back to your roots, because you guys obviously have an edge when it comes to Hong Kong representation, and of course when it comes to markets here as well. The decision to increase the minimum exposure of Hong Kong stocks to the index, was that a commercial decision, or was that something more to do with what market participants wanted?
I would say that's something the market wanted, because I think in our consultation, we check about the Hong Kong representation, and the number I have is that more than 80% of the feedback is showing positive to this as well. And that's why we make this move. And also, as I mentioned, the main direction is that we want to make HSI more balanced and diversified. So I think when we talk about balance and diversify, we try to take two perspectives. One is from the industry. and the other one is from Hong Kong and China perspective. So that's why we think that if we are going to select the constituents by 7 industries and also to sell a minimum for the Hong Kong number, so the overall portfolio will be more balanced.
Okay, and it's, as you point out, it's a toss-up, a balance between reinforcing your advantage in Hong Kong and obviously capturing that growth of mainland Chinese companies. Would you be able to tell us which of those two things are top priority for you?
I would say both, because as I mentioned, we want to balance. So I think we try to make the index balance from different perspectives. So I think in the coming constituent selection, we will try to put all the factors together to see which result can really try to reflect different perspective of the market. Because I think you can imagine if from the industry perspective, different industry has different characteristics or different coverage in the market as well. So
Right.
we want to mimic the market distribution and try to reflect in the portfolio, in the HSI portfolio as well.
Okay, and you've been looking at product here for a long time. So my question is then, when you look, say, at from an earnings perspective, EPS contribution to the index, a lot of the mainland companies in the index contribute a lot more of the earnings than, say, the Hong Kong companies, for example. So my question is, if, by setting a minimum, does that risk you creating an artificial imbalance then and forcing, say, investors of taking a little bit more exposure to Hong Kong markets than they actually need to? I don't know. What do you think?
I think that as I mentioned, that the main consideration is about the balance, okay? So I think when we talk about that, and also including the main selection for the HSI constituents, we will depend on the market value and also the turnover and also the industry representation. So I think we will try to look at that areas to see what's the best to the HSI constructions.
Okay. Understood. Now, part of the other changes is the number of constituents. That's another thing. We went up to 55, I believe, then that goes up to 80, and eventually, correct me if I'm wrong, we go up to 100 stocks. That's the objective. Do you have a rough timetable when you want to get to 100 constituent Hang Seng Index?
I think the first step we are aiming at is mid next year. We want to target at 80. And then I think if talking about 100, I think we don't have a concrete timeline, and it also depends on the market development and also the constituents' performance on that. And also, I think we want to kind of implement the 100 number of constituents gradually.
Okay, so gradually, a couple of years, I would imagine then. Now, when I look at the changes, and certainly, I talk to a lot of people in the street, a couple of people are my friends. I'm curious though, was there one change that almost made it from the consultations that didn't quite pass that bar for you?
You mean that there is any area that maybe the feedback from the market is not so clear? I just want to clarify.
Yes. I mean, you guys did consultations for a number of weeks, and then obviously what came out of those consultations, we're looking at that on your press release, these changes. But is there something that isn't here that almost made it? Was there something that the market wanted that didn't quite pass the bar, if you will, this time around?
I would say for the 5 enhancements, put it that way, for the particular one area that maybe the participants has a little bit different view is about the listing history. Because in the consultation paper, we are trying to propose to kind of to drop the listing requirement, the listing history requirement. But when we talk to the people in the market, they actually counter suggest, or they have a view that they may prefer to have listing history requirement, but shorter one. Because the existing HSI requires the listed companies to have 24 months history. So they want to shorten it to 3 months.
Understood.
I think this is the area that I want to highlight.
It is, and it is, I would imagine, you guys adjusting to the changing times. And, we have a lot of big names coming to the market, not that they're going to be in the index, Baidu, Tencent Music, what have you, but it is a changing environment. It must have been a very busy last couple of months for you as well. Reason I bring that up, the sanctions list in the U.S., you guys were, I think, one of the only major index compilers to actually keep some of those sanctioned stocks within the index. Was that a difficult decision for you to make?
I would say we, the Hang Seng Indexes company, we compose a family of indexes, and each index reflects the performance of a particular segment in the market. So I think each index has an index objective. And then I would say also is that we keep the communication with the client to understand the investability issue of their products. And then we also open and also explore the customized index solutions with them to address any issues if they have for the investability issues.
Okay, so you're done with a lot of the big work, and we'll see what happens when you guys roll this out. Final question for you, Anita. What other priorities do you have as CEO right now of the business? Like, what are the big things you want to see in place for the rest of this year?
I think for the product offering, what we are thinking is that because of the ESG directions, we are thinking to offer more ESG indexes. In particular, could be the E one, the green part. So I think this is the key product focus, one of the key product focus we have this year.